All right, let's talk about a story that pretty much everyone knows, or at least thinks they know. Noah's Ark. It's one of those tales that feels like it's been around forever. But what if I told you the story you remember is just the tip of the iceberg, and what's underneath is way more complex, and honestly, a whole lot more fascinating?
Yeah, of course you do. I mean, the giant boat, all the animals marching in 2 by 2, those images are burned into our collective brains. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this super familiar story and uncover the version you probably didn't get told as a kid.
You know, this is the Sunday school version. It's a really nice, comforting picture, isn't it? You've got a good guy, a loving God, and this big floating zoo bobbing safely on the water. It's a story about a fresh start, a clean slate. But this cozy picture hides a really big, really troubling question.
And boom, that quote from theologian Peter Harlan just gets right to it. He asks, how can God forbid killing people right after he just wiped out almost everybody on the planet? All of a sudden, this isn't a cute story for kids anymore, is it? It's a massive theological puzzle that makes you ask some pretty tough questions about justice and mercy and what God is all about.
So that brings us right to the heart of it, to what a lot of scholars call Noah's Great Paradox.
So, what is this paradox? Well, it's this. How can the same God who says human life is so sacred that you can never take it be the same one who just unleashed a flood to end almost all of it? It is a wild contradiction, and figuring it out is actually the key to unlocking what this story is really trying to say.
To even begin to wrap our heads around this, we have to go back. We have to ask, what was the official reason for doing something so extreme? I mean, why did it have to rain so much in the first place?
Was this just, a random act of a ticked-off deity, or does the story itself give us a specific reason for hitting the reset button on the whole planet? The answer here is actually super important for understanding the story's logic.
Turns out the Bible gives us two main reasons. First, it says that people's thoughts had become just evil all the time, so much so that God actually regretted making us. And second, that the world was just full of violence. It had completely corrupted the perfect world God had made. So the story wants you to know this wasn't random. It was a moral judgment. Okay, but this is where the detective work gets really fun. Because as people started studying the text super closely, they found these little cracks in the story, things that suggest there's something else going on right under our noses.
It turns out, if you read it with a critical eye, you realize the story doesn't just have a big philosophical problem, it has some basic, straightforward contradictions. The details just don't line up.
For example, check this out. In one part of the story, what we'll call account A, Noah is told to bring 7 pairs of the clean animals, but in another part, account B, it just says 1 pair of every animal. And then there's the timeline. Did the rain last for 40 days, or did the floodwaters cover the earth for 150 days? These aren't just tiny details. They point to 2 different stories.
So what gives? Well, the best explanation is that we're not actually reading one single story. We're reading at least 2 older flood stories that some brilliant editor wove together to make the one version we know today. And realizing that is a total game changer.
Okay, so if the biblical story is really a mashup, where did those older stories come from? Well, that investigation leads us outside the Bible into the ancient world of Mesopotamia. See, a big flood story wasn't a new idea. Far from it. The epics of Atrahasis and Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia have incredibly similar stories that are centuries older than the version in the Bible. When these ancient tablets were discovered back in 1872, it absolutely shocked the world. It proved that Noah's story was part of a much older tradition.
But, and this is the most important part, while the stories sound alike, big flood, a hero, a boat, the reason for the flood is completely different. In the Mesopotamian myths, the gods get rid of humanity because people are just too loud. They're annoying. It's a flood caused by divine irritation. The biblical story, though, it's all about moral corruption.
This is so key. The biblical writers weren't just, hitting copy-paste. No way. They were making a powerful argument. They took a story everyone in their culture knew, and they completely rewired it. They turned a story about a bunch of cranky, unpredictable gods into this deep drama about a single God, about morality, and about consequences.
Okay, so let's tie all of this together. We've got the paradox, we've got the contradictions inside the story, and we've got the historical context. So what's the final verdict here?
When you put all the evidence on the table, it becomes pretty clear that trying to read Noah's Ark as if it's a literal history textbook completely misses the point. The story is using the language of myth to argue about something much bigger.
So the story behind the story? Well, it's a deep dive into the very tough problem of divine justice. It's this amazing quilt patched together from older tales. And most of all, it's a powerful argument that the world is run by a moral code, not by the random moods of petty gods. It's a critique and a piece of theology, all disguised as a simple story about a guy, a boat, and a lot of rain.
And that just kind of leaves you wondering, doesn't it? If a story as famous and as simple-seeming as Noah's Ark is holding all this complexity right under the surface, well, what other stories that we think we know inside and out are just waiting for us to discover what they're really about?